everybody. You've tuned into the Indiana State Police Roadshow. The Indiana State Police Roadshow is brought to you each and every week by the Indiana State Police, Cops for Kids, subsidiary of the Indiana State Police. I'm your host, Sergeant Rich Myers from District 52 Public Information. I've got with me today First Sergeant Paul Hansard. Paul is the supervisor for the Indiana State Police Polygraph Unit. Thank you for being here, Paul. I appreciate you coming in.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We've been trying to get him for quite a long time, and these guys are very, very busy, especially the time where I was trying to get him before. We had a new applicant class going through, and Paul's going to discuss why he would have been busy during that time. But, Paul, give us a little bit of background. How did you become an Indiana State police officer? What made you say, hey, I want to be a police officer?
Well, going back, I can go all the way back to 8th grade for that one. So okay. I remember a trooper coming in to talk to a class we had and just looking at him with the greatest of admiration, thinking, wow, that's what I want to do. So started in about 8th grade, so I set out my career path to do that. Went to Ball State. Was first in my family to graduate from college, so got a degree in criminal justice criminology, came on the department then in 1996, started my career up at the Red Key Post as a trooper.
Yeah.
Since that time, I've done a lot of different things on the department. Spent a year in the drug enforcement section, was a district detective at the Red Key Post, and then went down to Pendleton Post as a detective.
Right.
And then from that point, came into the Polygraph Unit in 2011 and been there ever since.
Well, great. Well, it's glad to have you here with us today to talk about the Polygraph Unit. And for people maybe that aren't aware, Polygraph is kind of a common name is?
Lie detector. That's what a lot of people call it.
Yeah, but it's more than that, and I'm sure it's evolved tremendously since it first came about.
It has. The technology, the type of testing, all that is so much more advanced than it was years ago. The types of testing techniques and things we use are a lot better, a lot more accurate than what was out there before.
Well, kind of what's the history of the state police with the Polygraph Unit?
Right, and it's interesting. Lieutenant Delmer Gross, a few years ago, compiled the history of the State Police Polygraph Unit, and going back and looking through some of that, it's a good read. He went through and interviewed people that had done it probably since the early 70s, but knew the history then dating all the way back to the early years of the department. And we had guys that always were interested in detection of deception, usually, the criminal investigative mind kind of guys that were into that. So some of the guys had bought their own equipment. We even had one trooper that had made some equipment that he thought was similar to what polygraph equipment was at the time. So, but then officially in 1970 is when the department decided to send 4 people to polygraph school. They went to the Keeler School of Polygraph, and that's when the unit officially started. John Danbury was the first supervisor of that unit at that time, and they carried on, ran examinations all across the state of Indiana. And then Hugh Chambers took over the Polygraph Unit after that and ran it until his retirement in 1993. And then that was about the time I came on the department. First Sergeant Mark James then ran the unit for a number of years, all the way up until 2010. Mark did a great job, and as a detective, I used him quite often. And then Captain Sid Newton took over the unit then after Mark James, and then that's when I came into the Polygraph Unit to take over for Sid as an examiner. I served Central Indiana at that time. And then Sid was recently promoted last November to Assistant Commander of the Laboratory Division, which opened that supervisor's job. And so I'm now the 5th one to hold the supervisor's position for the Polygraph Unit. So kind of neat history with that.
Now, where's your supervisory? Where do you supervise at?
I'm based on the Indianapolis Regional Laboratory, but our examiners are spread all over the state of Indiana. So like in Northwest Indiana, we have Sergeant Stephanie Thompson that conducts polygraph exams up there. Northeast Indiana, we have Sergeant Matt Collins. And then in southwestern Indiana, we have Sergeant Dan Gress. He's got the most experience in the unit, been in the unit itself about 20 years. So Dan's been there a long time.
Yeah.
And then we just recently got 2 brand new examiners. Sergeant John Campbell is going to serve Central Indiana, and Sergeant Rick Roseberry then will serve Southeast Indiana, so around the Sellersburg and Versailles area.
And you were telling me they're in school right now.
They are. They're at the NCTC, which is the Northeast Counter Drug Training Center School. It's about a 12-week school that they're at. So I think they're just finishing week 4 out there.
Getting their feet wet.
Absolutely.
Well, tell us a little bit, how does a polygraph work?
Yeah, that's always a big question we get. What is this picking up on? What does it measure? How does it know if a person's being deceptive or not? So polygraph works at certain physiological responses that go on in our body when a person's being deceptive. And the way we monitor those, you've probably seen the 2 tubes that go around the chest. Some of the common movies out there, like Meet the Parents, has that great scene of polygraph. That's one of the more accurate showings of what the equipment is. So those rubber tubes are looking for changes or reactions that happen off the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles that help us breathe. Because what happens when a person's being deceptive, there's real slight changes on those. So we monitor those. And then the finger plates that go on the hand, pretty common. They slide on your fingers, but they're monitoring what we call electrodermal activity, but that's basically like sweat activity in your fingertips. Because again, what they find is when a person's being deceptive, there tends to be an increase in that sweat gland activity. And then the other thing you see, most people have had their blood pressure taken before, so we do have a blood pressure cuff. It goes on their left arm, and we monitor what we call relative blood pressure. So we put just a little bit of air in that cuff and then watch it over the course of the examination to see if it's actually going up or coming down. Because again, what they find is when a person tends to be deceptive, there's an increase in that blood pressure. So we monitor all those. If you've seen them in the movies, commonly on TV, you see the old instruments with the needles going up and down, paper running out of it. That's like the one I took to come on the department. Yeah. But that's outdated technology now. Everything's digital, so we look at it on a computer screen, analyze it the same way. The tracings are the same thing. So we look at those results as we're reading people through a series of questions that we've already built in and talked to them about. And then we look at those responses. We assign a numerical value to those. And then based upon where that numerical value falls for the whole test is whether or not we determine whether they're being deceptive or there's no deception indicated.
But if I'm hearing you right in saying this, but it's not a lot unlike the movies. They're not surprised by the questions. You've gone over these questions with them before?
Absolutely. During the polygraph phase, it starts off, we spend some time getting to know the person when they come in there. That's important, that rapport building time, because again, people are going to be really anxious when they come in to see us. Whether that's in a criminal case or a pre-employment setting, there's a lot of anxiety based on that. So we spend time getting to know them. Cover a lot of different questions then about their background, and then the next thing we're doing with them is talking about their case. Why are they there? What's it involve? After that, then we work on the questions for their test together. So they hear all those questions before they ever take the polygraph exam, word for word. So that gives them a chance to maybe bring some of that anxiety down a little bit.
Am I right in asking this? Maybe are you there to prove that they're telling the truth?
Right. The whole purpose of the polygraph examination is just find out the truth behind the situation. We have just as many people test truthful as we do that test deceptive. So it's our job that if a person is coming in there and they're being truthful, to make sure that's the way they go out the door.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
What do the Indiana State Police, what do we test for? Who do we test for?
Right. We do all types of investigations with criminal investigations for other departments and our own department. I would say probably used for other departments more than our own. All kinds of local police departments, sheriff's departments use us. But we do criminal cases, everything from theft to child molest is a very common one because that's usually a he said, she said type of case.
Correct.
Child pornography type cases, arson investigations, all the way up to murder and everything in between on the criminal side of the house. Then we also do what we call pre-employment screening, which is our testing that we do for anybody coming to work for the department. Now, interestingly enough, reading through that history, that started in 1974 was the first class to experience polygraph for the state police, but they did it after they were already in the academy. So they had hired these guys and started them in the academy, then ran them on a polygraph and actually had to remove a couple of them because of things they found out. So now it's part of the entire application phase. So after they've went for their oral interview, then they come see us for a polygraph, and then after us, they move on to the background phase. So we do all those for our own department, every hiring process that we have. We also do them for the Capitol Police and our Commercial Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division. We do all the pre-employment testing for them. Recently, we've picked up doing pre-employment testing for the Department of Natural Resources Law Enforcement Division or conservation officers and also excise police. In addition to doing those types of exams, we do internal affairs and administrative kinds of cases, both for our own department and other departments when we're asked. Probably not as many of those, but we do a few occasionally. And then we also test people in our criminal intelligence section as well on a somewhat routine basis, or if they're just going into there, into that section, we'll test them.
I understand.
Yeah.
So, where are your polygraph exams conducted? Do you have special locations?
Absolutely. What we try to do is we like to have people come see us because we've got rooms set up at several locations that are nice neutral rooms located in a private setting somewhere, usually inside a state police post. Soundproof rooms, everything's audio, video recorded. That's both for their protection and ours, but we've got all that equipment already set up. So like in central Indiana, we test here at the Indianapolis Regional Laboratory. There's also a testing facility there at the Pendleton Post and over at the Putnamville Post. And then Sergeant Stephanie Thompson, she tests at the Lowell Regional Laboratory and also at the Lafayette Post. Sergeant Matt Collins, that has Northeast Indiana, he tests a lot of his at the Huntington Police Department Annex. They've been gracious enough to set us up with a facility there, the type of room we wanted with the equipment. Also the Grant County Sheriff's Department, and he will also go up to the Bremen Post and Peru Post to do his test. Sergeant Dan Gress has a facility located at the Jasper Post, and then 2 other police departments have been nice enough to let him have an office there. So at Tell City Police Department and Vincennes Police Department, they've got a polygraph suite located there. And then Sergeant Rick Roseberry, when he's up and running, he'll be testing at the Sellersburg Post and also the Versailles Post.
That's very interesting. Now, do you have to have that location if necessary? Can you do that somewhere else?
Absolutely. And like I said, with it being digital now, we can take a laptop. Everything will pretty well fit in a briefcase now with the equipment. So it makes it a lot nicer to be able to go to remote locations if we have to. Again, because we have to audio, video record, then we might set up like a webcam or something like that. But there are occasions where we'll go inside some of the prisons on different cases.
Okay.
If they set us up with a nice quiet room, we will go in with that portable equipment, and everything, like I said, is contained in a briefcase. So we're able to do that if we have to. We just prefer to bring him to our location, though, because everything's already set up for that.
Well, again, you've tuned into the Indiana State Police Roadshow. We've got a very, very interesting show here today with First Sergeant Paul Answered from the Polygraph Unit of the Indiana State Police. We're talking about the Polygraph Unit section, the State Police, commonly known as the lie detector. Our show is brought to you by the Indiana State Police Lions and Cops for Kids. Paul, are polygraph examinations, are they admissible in court?
That's one of those big misconceptions out there. A lot of people think, no, polygraph can't be used in court. A lot of the things they read on the internet tells them that, or they see it on TV, but it actually is in Indiana in certain cases. The Supreme Court in like 1998, 99 came out with a ruling saying we're leaving that up to individual states to decide how they want to use that. Indiana's policy then on polygraph is if the prosecutor's office and the person taking the polygraph test and their attorney sign off beforehand, it's called a stipulated agreement, then all of those results can be used in court. That's probably 50% of the cases we do are stipulated cases then that are going to go to court. The other cases we'll do, though, any of the information that we talk about then beforehand or afterwards, all of that can be used in court, just not the actual examination itself.
Now, is that treated just as any other evidence? This is evidence in the trial?
Absolutely. It's treated just like any other piece of evidence that would be used. And again, the jury will weigh that and determine what weight they want to put on it.
And during that testimony, do you have to discuss and show the chart and here's how this works?
Yes. And so like Dan Gress down south, I told you, with about 20 years experience. So he's an expert in most of the courts down there because he's testified so many times in stipulated cases. And there's a few counties here in central Indiana that have used us. So it kind of depends on the area that you're in, whether or not that prosecutor's office is using those stipulated agreements. But usually they will do a hearing and have you testify then as an expert in the field of polygraph.
Well, this is very interesting stuff that I wasn't even aware of, and what our department was doing with this. But do you find that a lot of the departments that ask for us come back and use us again?
Absolutely. A lot of repeat customers, which we're glad for. Anytime that we can help those other agencies out, we're very glad to do so. They may have a smaller budget, smaller department, so they can't afford to send someone off to polygraph school or have the equipment, so they'll use us there in the laboratory division, like they do any other part of the lab. You know, we do the DNA testing, fingerprints, and all those things. So they'll use us pretty frequently. And like I said, it tends to be more of other departments in our own department, although we do plenty of exams for our own investigators as well. So, yeah.
Well, we've run out of time here. We've ran through this. Can I have you back again?
Absolutely. I'd be glad to come back.
I'd love to continue talking on this because we got a lot more information we want to share on this. So I think I'm going to have Paul back again next week and have him continue on this. Tom is he's He's can't believe what's going on here. He's giddy. But we're going to talk to Paul again next week and continue with our conversation about the Polygraph Unit of the Indiana State Police, which is a division of the Laboratory Division, and find out some more about how this works and what goes on. Again, you've been listening to the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance. Cops for Kids, a subsidiary of the Indiana State Police Alliance. I'm your host, Sergeant Rich Myers. I've had First Sergeant Paul Hansard here. We appreciate you listening. Catch us again next week. We're going to be discussing the Polygraph Unit again. Roadshow out.